We are going to use this time to study some master artists and their use of atmospheric perspective in their pieces. And then we're going to use this to help us really study value, clarity, color, temperature, saturation, and how we can use all of that and then some to really create depth in a piece. And I don't mean shallow depth like something in a small room, but I mean depth, showing typically a landscape or a very big hall or room inside a building could potentially show atmospheric perspective, but distance, something far in the distance. Okay, so first we're going to dive in and we're going to use the Ringling Museum's European and American art collection. There's a link. There's 124 pieces here, tons of opportunities of atmospheric perspective. So look through these. Really, though, this lesson could be utilized for all kinds of different art. That's just where I'm going with this. And I'm going to do my example using this Lieutenant General Philip Honeywood, who probably had this piece commissioned to show off how grand and awesome he was. So I'm going to click on the piece. I'm going to right click. Actually, I'm going to click into the piece even more to get a bigger option. I'm going to right click, save image as. Know where you are saving things. Do not save things just in downloads. That should be dumped often. Your computer runs better if you don't have a million things on it in your downloads. So know where you're saving things. I'm going to put this under my documents, my digital illustration, and this is also going to be saved locally as we emerge with lots and lots of options of saving things kind of remotely on a cloud. This is what I call local. We're saving this locally on our computer. So I'm going to name this the General. Oops, let's spell it right. And I'm going to save that in here. You can see where I've already done some others. Hit save. Okay. Now we're going to go in Photoshop. This is what we're going to create. We're going to start with a file new. And from there, we want to change this to inches if it's not already there. We also want to turn this, you kind of guess at first, but about 20 inches and height about 8.5 inches. We'll leave resolution at 300 pixels. That's a nice high resolution. Color mode is not that big of a deal. This isn't not going to be printed. That would mean we would use CMYK more. We'll leave it RGB because we're doing a digital study of this. And we won't get into any of the advanced options. We'll hit create. Now here is our artboard. And at this point, I like to go in and name mine. I do not name ahead of time because I don't know where that's saving. So we'll do a save as, and let's just remind ourselves this is local, but I could click into my cloud. I could click back into local. I like to do both. So we're going to name this, let's see. We'll name this Lieutenant General Philip Honeywood. And then my name, and notice I don't put spaces in there, and then I do not want a PNG. I want a PSD Photoshop file. Okay, so that looks good. You could have just typed that out, but make sure you have this extension. It's very important. A .PSD is very different than a .PNG. It's sort of like saying a nail versus a screw. You know, maybe both show images, but screws are used for very different things than nails. So you've got to keep that in mind, that that is important. I'm going to hit save, and now I have this saved. So let's bring in our image. I like to place embedded whenever I possibly can. This is kind of a smaller image that was on the internet, so it's already been optimized. It's pretty small, the image that we're going to be placing in here. If you were trying to place a beautiful, large resolution image, you might want to do place linked. There's reasons for both. We'll use embedded for this. We're going to go find our image, and we will hit place. Once it's placed, I'll hit return, and I'm good to go. I could lock this over here, and I don't think it's a bad idea by any means to go ahead and lock things. And then we will get started. So we're going to conduct a color study at first, and then we're going to recreate this with a light sketch. We're not going to recreate it exactly. It's but we're going to do our best. So the first thing we are going to do is make a new folder in our layers window. If our layers is not open, open up window, get to that. So a new folder, I'm going to name this Atmospheric Perspective. And then inside that, I'm going to click 3 times on the new layer button. Bam, 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 so that I get all 3. I'm going to rename the top one foreground. I'm going to name the middle one midground. And I'm going to name the lowest one background. Because remember, these layers really matter with where they're stacked on top of each other. Okay. You can start with whichever. I'm going to start with the foreground, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit with my Command plus. Command plus is zoom in, Command minus is zoom out, and I use a lot of the hand tool. I also have my digital tablet in and working, but I'm also using my other hand on the keyboard. I understand a lot of us might be pro creators, and that's a little more simple to paint right on your tablet. These will give you more and more options, and yes, it means using more and more, of your hands with those more options. So it will feel tricky at first, but the more you do this, the better it will get. So I kind of I'm a righty, so I've got my tablet pen in my right hand, and I've got my left hand on my keyboard ready to hit all my shortcuts that I use a lot. Let's compare it again to those hammers and nails. Or nails and screws. It's like having all of the tools versus maybe only 3 tools to build a house. This has a lot, which can feel a little cumbersome, but you can do so much more once you learn how to do these tools. So push through it. So my paintbrush at this point, I've got a brown loaded. I can load black. I've got my control panel up here. I know I'm within my foreground layer. That's really, really important. And I also am noting my opacity, my flow. I don't mess with my smoothing too much, but I do mess with these buttons, 1, 2, 3. And you'll kind of see that as we go through this when I, hit some of those versus not. And what those buttons do is when they're on, I've got a lot more sensitivity. As I am light on my tablet, I get this thin line. If I push, it's much thicker, and that just gives you a lot more ability. Now sometimes I don't want opacity, I want a big block of color, so then I'll take that off and you can color in. Now another shortcut key, we've got the Command plus and minus, we've got our space bar. The other one I love are my brackets right to make things bigger, and my brackets left. So when I want to block in some color, I'll get my brush really big. Okay, and Command Z until I get back to nothing on there. Perfect. Okay, so get your screen where you can see a little bit of both areas. The reason why we set this up so long is because we'll have a sketch, we'll have our, masterpiece, and we'll have our study. So we're kind of packing a lot into this one document. You got to be able to move around on it. So I am going to first do my foreground colors. And here I go. You're going for your darkest colors and your lightest colors, and then kind of the in-between, I think, is kind of the easiest. With your brush selected, I personally at this point am probably using my hard brush almost all of the time. In this whole lesson, actually, I will use a hard brush. I'm not going to use a soft brush like maybe I have before. So there's that. Now, I want big blocks of color. So I want to turn off this little opacity moment, this sensitivity of opacity. I was trying to let it show for you all. Always use pressure for opacity. So I don't want pressure to affect it. I just want a big block of color while I do this part. Okay, so, and then Option with my other hand turns my brush to the eyedropper, which is really nice. So let's grab my darks. Let's grab a few other darks possibly, like maybe over in this tree zone. Let's grab some of our lightest. Here's a light color. We'll put those on the left side. We're going to kind of spread these out. Here's some light color. And it starts to get a little bit more. And I'm not grabbing every single color, obviously, but you want a good variety of your colors to showcase. Let's get some of our lighter brown. I'll put that over here. And let's hit some of our darker browns that are in this horse. Nice. That gives us a good option. This is very, very important what I'm about to say. You need to click into the next layer. If you start painting while you're in the foreground layer, you won't be able to separate these items. So click into midground and let's grab the midground. So as I dissect this, it's very obvious, you know, our lieutenant is and his horse are the main focus. They're huge in the front, in the foreground, as well as some of these treescape. My midground area to me is kind of this, I'm looking at this block of trees, and then my background is whatever this is far off in the distance. It's honestly really hard to tell, but we'll get to that point. So this is my midground area. And I'm going to kind of look at the sky, you know, I'm not going to get all of this tree into my midground because really, if you're looking at a true cross section where this horse's feet are, that little plot of dirt is kind of close. And frankly, even some of this leading up to this tree, if you're truly cross-sectioning. So I'm going to kind of look at the things right at this level of these trees and start my new one. So I'm on my midground. I've got my brush with eyedropper, and I'm going to hit some of these colors. Dark, kind of middle. I don't think I'm going to have as many. I can already tell right now. I'm not going to go over here because that's something further away, even though it is close in the cross section. Let's get the main kind of green. Kind of this green. Let's get what appears to possibly be the tree trunks, which is a little darker. I can undo. I could put this guy kind of in the midst of here. Ooh, he looked weird there. Oh, no. I guess he almost, no, he's lighter than that. So yeah, right there would be where he would go. Let's hit these lightest colors of these trees, like kind of these little moments. And we already got some of this, but we'll get one more color in there. Okay, that looks pretty good, and it's okay that they're not taking up the same distance. Background, let's click into the background. Now let's study this weird little section. Zoom in, see what we're working with. It kind of looks like maybe both some trees and some mountains. So that's really important to get in there and really see what we're dealing with. Let me back up where I can see enough. Use my option, grab some of the dark coloring. Where is the darkest spot in these like trees? Like maybe kind of in there. It's really not very dark. And then let's grab this kind of like lightest color. Now, the sky is not our atmospheric perspective. We want to think of objects. The sky is literally how many million miles away? It's not a tangible item like these mountains could be that we could touch. The sky is not something you need to put into your atmospheric perspective study per se. It's the objects inside of it. So don't grab clouds as the furthest, even though maybe we think of it that way. That's very different. We want to try to find objects that are truly on the ground, experiencing the atmospheric perspective, not the actual atmosphere. The sky is truly the atmosphere. Okay, so we have our study, our color study. Awesome. We're done with that piece of the puzzle. Let's go save. That's always smart. Now let's go do a quick value study. This is really fun. So I'll put my pen down for a second. I mean, you can keep using your pen, but I'm going to make an adjustment above. I'm going to click on atmospheric perspective, and I'm going to click on this adjustment layers, and I'm going to choose hue saturation, which feels a little funky, but we're going to use it so that we can study values, which are the whites, the grays, and the black inside the piece. And sometimes that can get hard because the color, the hues that our eyes see, can weigh that value differently than maybe what it really is. So this will give us a pretty accurate reading of the underlying white, gray, black inside each of these cross-section colors. So hue saturation, it makes this new layer, and in your properties window, and again, if it's not open, go open it. You can adjust things, hue, saturation, lightness. We're only going to mess with saturation, and we are just going to toss it down to the bottom. And then look, really look at what is happening in those colors. It's doing it to everything right now. We could clipping mask it to just this layer, but that's fine. But now you can really see what's happening. Look at this full spectrum of value in our foreground, because that foreground always has the most contrast, the highest level of contrast of whites and black inside its colors. It's closest to us, our eyes can see them. Then they start to get more muted, right? They're kind of similar. I can see my eye really, if I blur my eyes, I kind of only see a couple of variations of midtones, of grays, kind of these colors. A little dark, some of them, but kind of midtones. And then our background that's furthest away from us, look at how light. Just these first few colors on the value scale really is what these are taking up. Okay, so that helps us really start to define what is value in this piece, separate from maybe saturation, because saturation is happening in the color, and that's different than the actual values. Okay, so now we have that value study done. Let's go, and we're going to type some stuff out. I'm going to show you how to type some of these things, but then I'm also going to copy and paste what I've already written just to save us time in this little lesson. So you can be within your atmospheric perspective study folder, grab your type tool, and instead of just clicking, I want you to click, hold, drag to get a box. Great. Then while this box is selected, you can do all kinds of things. Like I can go grab my arrow tool. I can also change the size of it if I click back into here. And that just like helps our text stay in like a certain area. Let's go make the type much, much smaller, like a 10-point font. I think we even might need this to be a little tighter, the leading. And that just helps, like, this isn't a graphic design thing. We're just trying to fit some text in here. I can also get the color and change it to darker. And now we have that. So I'm going to grab my type tool again, and I'm going to hover over here and select all of this. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to spell out a few things. First, I'm going to talk about which layer which cross section of my piece I'm talking about. So this one's going to be foreground. I'm going to give myself some space by hitting return, and then I'm just going to type out the categories that I need us to all acknowledge in our own words. I do not want anything copied and pasted from the internet. I just want to hear you all ramble a little bit about your chosen pieces cross sections and use some of the vocab words that describe atmospheric perspective. So one of those words would be color values. What is happening with the colors? How many colors are there? Are there only a few? Are there a lot of colors? Also, what are the values? We just did this beautiful colors value study. Easy to see. What's happening with those values? Are there tons of varying values, a very wide spectrum of values, and lots of contrast? Lots happening. Or are they more muted? More mid-tone values and not a lot of contrast, or are they very, very low contrast and very, very light values? Those are the things I want you to talk about in your piece. The next thing we're going to talk about is the color temperature. So remember that warm colors on our color wheel are typically the reds, the yellows, the orange, sometimes the red violets, sometimes the limey greens. Sometimes greens can feel a little warmer. Then we start to get, as we get into the bluer greens, the blues, the purples, those are cooler tones. Remember, things that are closer to us typically show warmer tones of some degree. Things that are further from us typically have absorbed a little bit more of that blue atmosphere tint and resemble a little bluer tint to them. So those are the things I want us to talk about there. Scale. I want you to acknowledge something as a scale. You know, the trees are huge in the foreground, they're kind of medium in the midground, and they're undetectable in the background. I want you to comment on the scale of things between your 3 layers. Okay, and then last but not least, I want to hear a little bit about the details, because remember, things closest to us, we can physically make out the details. Our eyes are closer to it, we can see. Even if we have 20/20 vision, we start to lose details as things get further and further away from us. So I want you to talk about those details. Okay, now this is the degree I want you all to talk about this. Let's do just the foreground together, and then I'll copy and paste the others. So foreground, color values, lots of varying colors, lots of color variety, and then be specific in what you are talking about for your piece. In the captain's coat, and the horse. Oops, let's spell horse right. There is a wide range of values spanning from nearly white in the horse's face and eye to nearly black in the man's attire or boots or hat. You can be very specific. I want to hear those things. I don't need a beautiful written English paper. I need you all to physically tell me pieces of yours with atmospheric perspective. Okay, color and temperature. Let's dive into this one. The reds and golds of his jacket are warm temps. The brown of the horse is warm. That feels pretty good. Again, I want you to be specific with yours. Okay, scale. A few things. I have possibly trees in each cross section, but I also have this person. The focus of the horse and general show them the largest scale in this piece. See, I'm starting to run out of room. Bloop. I can pull this longer and have more space. I could pull this up higher and have more space that way too. The tree near them is large. Both them and the tree. This spot, that takes up like 50% at least. Take up nearly 50% of this piece. Okay, and last but not least, details. Let's comment on the details. I can see small details in the horse's eyes and the man's face, like his brows and nostrils even. Again, I don't necessarily care how your spelling is. That's not the point. Okay. Because even I've spelled that wrong. Nostrils. All right, that sounds good. This is about what I want to hear, and I want to hear that for each layer. Okay, let's rearrange this so it feels nicer. Here's my foreground. If this auto select is on or off, that can kind of be fun or annoying, actually. I can shrink this down so he's not so big and taking up so much room. And I can hit save. Okay. Now, for the sake of time, I'm going to rearrange these, and I'm going to go copy and paste from my other file that I've already set up for this lesson just to save us time. But that gives you a good idea. I really want to have you all pinpoint the things in your chosen piece. Talk about specific items in it. Do not just say big blanket statements. Okay. Talk about the mountains and trees in the background, things like that. Now, let's dive into the fun of sketching this out. We have done our color study, or our atmospheric perspective study, and that's all over here. We've hit save or Command S, and now we're ready to dive into, I think, the most fun part. We're going to do two new folders, a sketch study and a color study. So new folder, sketch, and inside this, I am still going to keep my things very specific. Foreground, midground, background. Okay. Now, I've got my tablet back. I'm done using my keyboard done using the typing tool. I am still using the keyboard for that hand tool, for all of my shortcut keys, but I'm back to using my tablet. Let's lock stuff so we keep things safe. And now I just have this sketch file with a foreground, midground, background. Let's sketch out our foreground. Grab the brush, load some black. Make sure you've got settings on the way you want them to be. I want all of my sensitivity on. Make sure your driver for your tablet's ready to roll with that. And I'm just going to lightly sketch. You're not tracing this. Watch how fast I'm going to try to do this for us. You should be spending, I'm going to spend probably 10 minutes on this. I'm very fast. I've been doing this a long time. My 10 minutes should probably translate to at least 30 minutes to an hour for you in just this sketch portion. I'm just going straight over. And now I get it. You can't see everything. So I hit back and forth a lot so that I can see it, because I do want my black lines and I don't want to fiddle right now in this portion with maybe drawing in a different color so that I could see it better. I'm just going straight in. Hitting the legs, the hoof. I understand that I make this look fast. Do not feel that way. And do not compare yourself to a digital artist that's been doing this professionally for nearly 20 years. So let's just get in there and do our best. Not great, not bad. Here we go. Hitting those feet. Check what I'm missing. Tail, because it's like, can't even see it. Make believe this tail, I guess. That works. I'll even give him some eyes, so don't forget that. His nose. I'll even give him some details, because we're showing that we can see these details. Okay. Now let's get our guy. I'm just, getting some of our details in there. That's about all I need for the face. Now, if you love this, if this makes your soul happy, spend more time. This same lesson could be done for an unlimited amount of pieces and artwork, and is really relevant for all of them. So here we go. Get his coat. If you ever do a weird line that you wish wasn't there, go grab your eraser. Go grab your eraser. No big deal. I can get that. I can get this piece off that was part of the horse that I just kind of quickly threw in there. Go back to your brush. I can hit my brush. I like to do it that way. Let's grab whatever this is. Like maybe a shield. His hand did I get? This back part of his coat. Let's get his leg. Oh, let's get part of his hand. And let's get part of whatever he's holding. Kind of, I don't know, in there. Maybe that's part of his hand. That's hard to see. Oh, that feels pretty good. And that's about the extent that I need. I will go ahead and get this tree a little bit in there. But I don't need a lot. Like you can see, I'm just sort of kind of getting a few of those moments in there. This tree is huge, but he's not really the star of the show. Okay, that's great. Mid-ground. Now, click into that layer, which is fine, and start your mid-ground. And it's all right if it overlaps a little because I'm going to cover that up in a little bit. Like here's some trees. Here's like these, let's zoom in. Here's these like trunks. Some of the trees. Here's the land, I guess. Oop. That's okay. I'll kind of tuck that back there because it probably keeps going. You know, maybe there's like a little bit of that. And if that's making me crazy, I can always erase this. Although my foreground's going to cover it by overlapping, but there we go. And now let's hop into the background. Very, very simple. We started with the toughest part. Now I think this is like land and then mountains. It's really hard to distinguish, again, because it's so far away. Okay, we've got our lines. That feels pretty good. We are ready to color. Such a fun part. At this point, I'm going to move this main one out of the way. I'm going to unlock it. I'm going to grab my arrow tool, and I'm going to pull this guy this way. And I notice I'm kind of running out of room, and that's annoying. I'm going to hit return. I'm going to go in with my crop tool, and I'm just going to pull my file bigger so that I can see all of that. That's no big deal. Okay, let's hit save. We've done a lot of work. We're on our last step. Let's go in here and colorize this. Close, lock, make a new folder, put it under the sketch, not inside one of these, under the sketch, and let's call this color. And inside there, let's add 3 new layers. Same thing, foreground, midground, background. Foreground, let's start. We've already got so many of these beautiful colors, but let's go in and outside of the study, I'll use my eyedropper to grab things over here. My very first round of this, I don't really necessarily want any of these things on. I definitely don't want opacity because I just want to block in color. So hear me out. Let's block the horse color in. Pick a color you think is sort of the base, like mid value of the horse. I'm going to use my right bracket until I can get a nice big, just like I just did. And if it's too dark, okay, like let's grab that one. And I'm going to just literally, oh, I forgot a leg. I just realized I forgot a leg. Look, we can come back in here and in my foreground, let me hit back quickly into giving us this leg that I see I forgot, which is great for you guys to still learn, you know, how to move some of this stuff. Here's the leg. Sketch, foreground, pen, things on, little. Probably black. Get your leg in there. You get back in there, mister. Okay. That works. Let's go move this again. Nope. And now I've got a leg there. Lock it, because that's always smart. Let's also lock our sketch layer. That can get crazy. And I'm on my foreground painting. So let's go back to my brush. Hit my control panel with turning some of these things off. Get a big brush, about this size. And let's just like dump this color in here. And as you're doing this, just notice, like, really think about some of these colors and what's happening with these colors. Look at all these warm ones in this. We can always make our brush bigger. It's all right to go over him some. I'm going to paint his color on in just a minute. So I don't mind kind of like covering that. If you ever get something you don't want, just go and erase it. It's no big deal. And you can set some of the same settings if you like to erase kind of more naturally, I guess. Okay. Let's get his little ears. That feels pretty good. Now, let's get some of the other things in. Let's get this dark, which is also pretty close to his tail. I'm going back and forth with the size of my brush. I don't necessarily need every little thing. I'm kind of getting some of these pieces in and not acknowledging every little part of it, and that's okay. Let's get some of this red blocked in. And I'm going to go over kind of all of him and then come back in with the lighter colors that he has. That like yellow. Because these are just blocks of color right now and they will all kind of work with each other. They'll cover each other. Let's get this hat. Actually, let's get this face. Let's get this hat. So dark. Look at that value. I mean, jeez. Let's get this little part of his jacket. We got his boot. Let's get some of this tan color on like his leggings or whatever. This next version. Let's get this gold. If you want to be really fun, you could make it much smaller and kind of really do like the little fun detail. Oh, I want to turn back on my stuff for that. You're going to have to go back and forth between these opacities and these different, you know, items to get them the way that you want them to be. This whole thing is kind of all gold, so I'll just do a big whatever of that. Oh, and I missed a little bit, so I got to be a little more careful. I missed a little bit of like the pad, I guess, that the horse was using. Okay. Not great. Let's get his hand. Maybe the other hand. There's our horse. He's all right. Now, let's paint in some of this base color underneath him before I get too crazy with his feet, because I'll need to go back over those and at least give him something to stand on. Now I can grab his feet color again and just plop that back on top. So we're just working in a single layer here. Now, if you feel more comfortable, add layers. I could never stop with this. Truly, I could keep going. I mean, you could spend 100 hours getting it exact. And kind of hit this guy. I'll turn on the opacity. Kind of. And get a few of these moments in there. Okay. So there's some foreground. Oop. It's not perfect, but it's all right. Let's hit our midground. It's going to get easier from here. So let's start with our base colors, kind of that. And let's just swatch this all over. Now, because we clicked into our midground and it's located below all this foreground color, everything's going to be hidden. Oh, I do not want my opacity when I'm blocking in color. And that makes me crazy. Okay, there's the color I want. I like to get a nice fat block of color and then go in with like opacity things. Okay. Let's kind of choose our color. That feels kind of correct. It's all right if we're going behind the horse because remember we have these layers stacked nicely. Let's get some of this darker in here. Oof, that got really dark. We don't want things to look too detailed, so let's tone down some of that. Getting in the other colors in there. They are kind of blobs. Let's get the tree trunk, or what we kind of think is the tree trunk. And then maybe sort of this like darker zone sort of tucks in behind the horse. And that's okay. All right, now we're ready for our background. We're almost there. I know this might take a little bit, but let's start by blanketing in kind of this little section of color. Again, I'm inside my background layer. Then let's pull some of the lighter, I guess. It's every artist is a little different if they like to start with their lightest or their darkest. But there's that. See, and that gets really contrasty. Look how contrast that is compared to this. So I need to blend some of this together. That cannot live with such darkness. There we go, with such high contrast. All right. And we're not acknowledging the sky, right? Because we're acknowledging the objects within the scene. Now, let's see what we have. We've got a color layer that's divided up for our foreground, our midground, our background. We've really dove into some of the nuances in those layers. We've spent some time on that. Then we've got our atmospheric perspective. We've got our sketch on top that's kind of keeping everything together, and our main piece. Okay, make sure you hit save. Then remember that saving things can also happen on your cloud. I was saving locally. You could save on your cloud. I'm going to. That's a very smart thing to do. Next, this is the layered file that you will submit to me. Showcasing that you kind of have dissected and are starting to understand the pieces of a master's atmospheric perspective usage in their piece. So I hope this gave you some insight and some ideas on dissecting even more pieces and inspire you to try it on some other stuff.